In 2024, a truck carrying processed cocoa crossed from Côte d'Ivoire into Ghana. Its payment cleared not in dollars or euros, but instantly through a Pan-African settlement rail in West African CFA and Ghanaian cedi. This was more than a transaction. It was a signal. That single moment is part of a much bigger surge, one rewriting the economic DNA of an entire continent. Because in 2024, Intra-African trade hit $220 billion, climbing more than 12% in a single year. It was the kind of momentum policymakers had spent decades pushing for. And yet, Africa still trades more with the rest of the world than with itself. Only 14% of its total trade happens between African nations, compared to 60% inside Europe and Asia. Integration is accelerating, but to understand what comes next, we need to go back to the framework that made it possible. When Africa was still just the world's most fragmented trade region, and the idea of a single continental market felt more symbolic than real.
Welcome to Spotlight in Africa, where we provide the clarity, data, and intelligence investors need to understand Africa's evolving markets.
For most of modern economic history, African markets grew outward, not inward. Infrastructure bottlenecks, inconsistent border policies, and currency friction made cross-border commerce slower and costlier than intercontinental shipping. But beneath the inefficiencies was a continent rich in complementary markets. Energy producers beside manufacturing hubs, agricultural powerhouses near fast-consuming importers, mineral giants, neighboring industrializing economies. The opportunity was always there. What Africa lacked was the connective tissue, a unifying trade architecture that could mobilize investors, scale industries, and harmonize regulation across 55 economies. Then came the blueprint. On January 1st, 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, officially launched, marking the start of the most ambitious trade integration project in Africa's history. By 2024, its impact was already measurable. Governments weren't just lowering tariffs, they were re-engineering trade mechanics. AfCFTA's real power wasn't membership size. Although at 1.4 billion people and $3.4 trillion in combined GDP, it became the world's largest free trade bloc by participation. The real inflection point was this. Nearly two-thirds of projected income gains, $292 billion out of $450 billion, are expected to come from trade facilitation reforms, not tariff reductions. In other words, the biggest economic unlock comes from fixing the plumbing, not just opening the doors. And once that realization took hold, African trade strategy would never be the same again. The shift catalyzed immediate sectoral realignments. South Africa emerged as the continent's largest intra-African trading partner, supplying everything from industrial inputs to consumer goods across multiple regions. Nigeria began scaling exports beyond crude oil, pushing refined petroleum, cement, and processed foods into West and Central African markets. Morocco strengthened its footprint in West and Southern Africa, leveraging automotive supply chains and phosphate-driven industrial demand. At the same time, Côte d'Ivoire increased regional processed cocoa exports, signaling a broader trend. African producers climbing up the value chain, not just shipping raw commodities. But integration needed more than goods. It needed financial rails investors could trust. That's where PAPSS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, became a quiet revolution. By enabling cross-border trade settlement in local African currencies, it removed one of the biggest friction points for intra-African exporters and regional investors. For the first time, traders could bypass expensive correspondent banking chains and currency conversion tolls, creating efficiency gains with direct capital market implications. Lower transaction costs meant higher margins, faster settlement, and greater attractiveness for cross-border investment flows. Then came a new external shock. Not a collapse, but a warning. In 2025, AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, expired, ending decades of preferential US market access. For many exporters, it crystallized a risk Africa had long carried: overdependence on external trade regimes outside African regulatory control. The timing was either catastrophic or catalytic. Africa chose catalytic. AfCFTA suddenly wasn't just an economic project. It became a continental risk mitigation strategy, a way to build resilience through regional value chains, internal demand, and African-governed trade corridors. By 2024 through 2025, Africa's integration agenda moved from ambition to reality, becoming one of the most important economic stories on the continent. Africa was trading more finished goods within the continent. Cross-border payments were clearing in local currencies. Regional supply chains were pulling investment into manufacturing and processing sectors. African producers were replacing commodity exports with industrial and consumer value-added trade. This wasn't just trade growth, it was market rewiring, creating new opportunities for capital allocation, equity expansion, logistics investment, and regulatory harmonization. The continent was proving something global investors had long underestimated. Africa's next economic frontier is Africa itself. Today, AfCFTA remains a work in progress, but no longer an idea. It is now the foundation of a new era where African trade expands inward, industries scale regionally, and capital markets benefit from improved liquidity, larger addressable markets, and stronger intracontinental investment narratives. The goal was never just higher trade numbers. It was economic sovereignty through integration. And while skeptics once dismissed continental trade unity as aspirational, the 2024 surge proved that when barriers fall and financial rails connect, Africa moves markets, capital, and opportunity at scale. This is the beginning of the age of African-led economic consolidation, where intra-African trade isn't just a percentage. It's a portfolio strategy, a growth engine, and a geopolitical equalizer.
For more intelligence on Africa's economy, finance, and capital markets, subscribe to our channel at Spotlight in Africa.